Does anyone remember what we did yesterday? You should do anyway. Does anyone want to kick it off? Mm. Okay, that was good. That was an interesting. Did anyone actually know that from before, or was that an insight for everyone yesterday? Sorry, man. Oh, okay. I think even most of the Muslims that would probably be. Am I upside down? Oh, it's not very good. Is that better? So for all of the Muslims, I think that was probably even an insight even for the Muslims, because we don't usually go that deep into the tafsir of the verses of the Quran. But one of the, I think the reason that's really powerful, the biggest thing that we took from that was that you'll have Muslims all at different levels, at different stages of their development. Yeah. So for example, you might have a Muslim who doesn't pray, or you might have a Muslim who doesn't fast, and is not doing much at all. So now when it comes to what they need to do, like I think sometimes, especially for the Muslims who are here, for those of the reverts, you probably already understand this to some extent, because obviously when you revert to Islam, the Imam or the scholar or the Sheikh who guides you through Islam will obviously use his brain and kind of try and give you Islam in some kind of bite-sized kind of chunk. So it's not all overwhelming and like you have to do this, you have to do this, you have to do this. Obviously, that you probably realize that doesn't happen. But the problem with people who are born Muslims, sometimes we don't get that. So we're born, and from the day you're born, your parents are like using Islam and using God to try and get you to do what they want you to, which is kind of control your life to some extent. So when that happens, then sometimes we start thinking that everything has to be in a certain way. So you have to pray a certain number of times in a certain way and do wudu in a certain way and fast this many days. And if you don't do any of these things, then you're a really bad person. Does that make sense to everyone? And then when we went through that verse yesterday, we realized that in reality, right from the beginning, right from the offset, everyone always has that chance. Everyone always has a chance to appreciate their journey. Yeah. So I think based on what we've been doing over the past few days is actually, rather than trying to figure out what we're meant to be doing, rather than me giving you loads of new information on how you should be, how you should behave, what you should be doing, very often it's not so much about that. It's more about figuring out where we are at the moment and how we're going to go forward from there. So that was one of the key points from yesterday. But seeing as everyone's being a bit shy, to be honest, we did go through yesterday quite quickly. So it was a lot of information to take in, even though I don't claim to give too much new information. There was a lot, because we were doing deep tafsir. Thanks, Sister Nicola. That's actually a big insight as well, because a lot of the times people revert and they don't actually have a guide. They don't have a specific guide or even a class to go to for their guidance. So they're kind of figuring it out themselves a lot of the time. And again, very often when you're figuring it out for yourself, if somebody's kind of just thrown into the Muslim community and you haven't actually got a specific guide, or you don't even have a specific class you go to, you're going to be in a community which thinks the way that Muslims think, which is that everything's very black and white. You have to do it like this, and if you don't, that's really bad. So that can actually be quite negative. Like even so for example, like I kind of said that generally Muslims, they don't have this problem. But I think what Nicola just said there is that even if somebody's reverts to Islam, and then they actually get thrown into the Muslim community and they don't actually have a guide, they don't have someone telling them that you're meant to take it in this way or this slowly, that they can get caught in exactly the same trap of kind of overthinking, over worrying, and kind of that issue of biting off more than you can always chew. I think is a good metaphor for that. So it is important. So it's not really a Muslim problem. It's just a problem which sometimes happens within our community, within our community. Sometimes we have that problem where we're a bit judgmental, basically. So if someone else comes, like I've known, if somebody prays a bit different, and prays a bit different to the way that we're praying, then we're like, oh, why is he praying like that? And then we start telling them off. If someone's fasting a bit different, like some people, like if someone, like even in Ramadan, there are reasons why it's possible that someone might not be able to fast. Someone might not be fasting. It's just actually very common, if I'm honest. Like, I was in Braintree, I think a couple of years ago. Wow, so long, about 4 years ago, I think. I was in Braintree breaking my fast, and there's a guy there who I think has some kind of illness. So because of that, he's actually the chairman of the mosque, and because of that, he can't fast. Perfectly legitimate. He's not going to be able to fast. And 3-4 years ago, we were in the 18 and a half hour fasting times. So he was kind of, everyone knew he wasn't fasting. But then again, not everyone has that awareness that it's actually normal for people to have excuses not to fast. And some people are taking it slowly and actually getting used to this whole process of fasting. So it's important as Muslims not to be like proper judgmental on other people, and actually give people the room which they need to actually grow. Because if you take away that freedom, if you take away that word which I love, which is autonomy, if you take that away, because I teach kids and I teach adults, and the problem I see with kids is that they have their autonomy removed from them. Yeah, so there's no curiosity there. The idea of, okay, this Quran is like a book which is going to connect me to Allah, and every time I pray, that's going to connect me with Allah. And my fasting is another tool to enhance my. Oh, my camera's that side. I just realized. My fasting is a tool to connect me to Allah as well. When you have that awareness, then you can use these tools to actually connect you to Allah. Does that make sense to everyone? So I think it is important to keep that awareness there, and try and develop and build autonomy to some extent. Especially, I think everyone in this course, in this call right now, we have that freedom to some extent to actually make our own decisions. If you want to fast, I mean, in the UK it's kind of up to you. We've got taps everywhere. So if no one's going to know if you drink water anyway. And so, alhamdulillah, I think fasting is that. I think one of the benefits of fasting. I'm sorry, I'm going to look at the chat in a minute, whoever that is. But one of the benefits of fasting is that it gives you that increased sincerity, because you can't really be doing it for somebody else's sake. It is kind of between you and Allah. So that's one of the powers there. Anyway, I think we went on a bit of a tangent there. But, before we even got to the verse. But I want to just quickly recap. I'm just going to read the chat quickly. See what's going on in the chat. Not everyone who I've read. Try praying in congregation when you haven't a clue. Yeah, and what do all the different terms mean? As a generality, Muslims assume everyone understands all the terms. True, man. Yeah, I think from what Nicola's saying is actually very, very true there. And we've got a lot of reverts here on this call actually. Ian, AJ, Nicola, and Abdul Quddus, obviously, who reverted to Islam at my hands a couple of years ago. Go on. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, true, man. I think that's something which Ian tells me all the time as well, because not books. Yeah, because you keep telling me about children's like YouTube channels which are designed for children, are quite useful. Yeah, I think that's good. So using children's books, I think the problem some people might have with that is that as adults we kind of want a bit of a deeper insight sometimes. But yeah, that's very true actually what Abdul Qadir said, if I'm honest. The basics that we need to know are actually there in the basic books which have been designed for children, and they help bring us up to speed with that, with the terminologies. But if it's a bit of a deeper terminology, like imagine it's like the word taqwa, for example. I think Nicola will have to explain what she means by terminologies, maybe. Um, mm, yeah. Hmm. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Mm, mm, mm. Yeah. 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 Mm, yeah. Now that's a really good point. Just to elaborate a little bit on that, in terms of the spiritual things, what I've noticed with reverts are a lot more in touch with their spirit than Muslims. Because also I teach Muslims. And in terms of taqwa and tawakkul and connecting to Allah, Muslims tend to not get it, if I'm honest. But new Muslims, reverts, tend to be a lot more in touch with the spiritual stuff. So I actually think non-new Muslims, reverts, people who have been forced to think about Islam before they make that decision to become Muslim, have a much deeper understanding of their spirit and Allah Himself, which essentially is actually like personally, definitely the most important thing anyway. But I don't want to miss the point here. The point is that even when we're praying, the terminologies and the prayers and the du'as and all that, they can get confusing. Now, I think here a revert would actually overestimate how much. If you're in the Middle East, it might be different, but if you're in the UK, like I'm going to talk about my own experience. Like I have quite a pious family. I didn't grow up that pious myself, if I'm honest. I went a bit, I became a bit unpious for a bit while I was growing up. But but as a kid, I was quite, I was in a very pious family. My dad's an imam, my brother's an imam as well, and I'm an imam now as well. But I was never taught how to pray. Like there was never like a moment where someone sat down and taught me how to pray. And I've actually learned that's the same for most Muslims. Muslims grow up, and for those of you that are now adults, if you think of a baby who you know, yeah, who becomes like 1 or 2 years old. When if you think of these babies, what happens is they get to the age of when they can start walking around and standing up and kind of things. Like I don't know how old they are, 1 year old or whatever, and they'll see someone praying, so they'll start joining in, and they'll like kind of jump up and down and lie on the floor and do it all a bit wrong. But essentially, they'll go from there to 2 or 3 years later. What they'll do is their parents will teach them Surah Fatiha, they'll teach them like some surahs of the Quran. If they're lucky, they'll be taught that in ruku you say this, in sajda you say this, and then you say this little dua at the beginning. But comprehensively, they won't actually go through an A to Z of salah. I'm talking about most Muslims in the UK. So most Muslims in the UK won't actually go through a comprehensive kind of explanation of how to actually pray, which is so this is what most like for the Muslims on this call. Would you agree with that? Like you don't get an A to Z of praying while you're growing up. Your dad doesn't sit down or your mum doesn't sit down with you and say you start with this and this is how you do. Although it's kind of you pick it up from the world around you kind of thing, in the same way that non-Muslims would do. And I find this with most of my students that they're actually surprised. Like we're kind of surprised at this, but it's also, I think, very true for the majority of Muslims. Abdul Hafiz agrees, alhamdulillah. But generally, from my experience of working with the people who I teach, definitely I'd say that's true. Which means that essentially just coming back to the first lesson, day one, of the most important ingredient for your spiritual journey is going to be curiosity. And the biggest enemy for your spiritual journey would be knowing. I think the main thing that will give you that curiosity is that just realizing that you haven't had an A to Z of Salah. In fact, let me give you an even deeper story here. Sorry, brother Abdul Hafiz, your mic's on. My Bangla's not that good, otherwise I'd have translated that. I've been in courses to... but anyway, so while I was studying in madrasa, I was in Blackburn for 4 years. So we go quite deep in madrasas. Like we're meant to be the experts, the scholars of Islam. So Abdul Qudus is here as well, which is nice because he's studied he's seen people study Islam for a long period of time. But I'm talking studying Islam full time for 5, 6, in some cases 8 or 10 years. So at the end of this, you have this. You go into the final year, which is known as Dora Hadith. So you do a Dawrah, you recap all of the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, not all of them, but the 6 main books, you go through them. And the fascinating thing is that in Blackburn, we have a teacher who actually comes to Bolton, Abdul Qudus, you know him, Mufti Inayatullah, the one that you're scared of, the one that we're all a bit scared of. But this teacher, what he'd do is in the very last year, so you've now studied Islam for 6 years. Yeah? In years, full time for 6 years. In year 6, near the end of the year, so this is the point where you're about to become a scholar, yeah, he would go through salah, praying. And I'm not going to exaggerate here, but I'd say so that class has about 50 people in there. I think at that time about 40 maybe. The majority of the class would get mistakes in the way that they would pray because they wouldn't even know how to do ruku properly. Like I'm talking about people who have studied Islam full time for this period of time. So now bringing it down to the average Muslim, like praying is always going to be something which needs enhancement, needs work on it on a basic level. So I think that's quite insightful really. I'm glad Nicola mentioned her point as well, that we're kind of expected to know, but I think at the same time there's always a lot to learn for everyone. In the Middle East, to some extent, the standard might be a bit higher. The baseline might be a bit higher. But even then, there's always so much to kind of go into. Like, I was thinking before Ramadan on how to kind of teach this connecting to Allah thing. And I was thinking of the importance of the actual positions of prayer themselves. What I mean by positions is the actual bowing position. So there's a certain amount of balance you need to have to be able to do ruku properly. Like something like yoga might help. Like if you don't have a certain amount of strength in your, whatever those muscles are called, on the back of your thighs, you're going to struggle to do ruku properly. And even transitioning from a standing position to the sajda position, to the prostration position, requires a certain amount of strength in your muscles, in that kind of way. So I think there's always a lot to learn, and I think the problem in the Muslim community is not so much that I think the problem is that we're very quick to decide that we know how to pray, and because we think we know, then when we see somebody else praying in a slightly different way, we kind of become a bit judgmental, and I think what happens with reverts is reverts see Muslims. And the Muslims kind of think that they all know how to pray, and therefore they kind of find it hard to actually engage in a learning process as opposed to actually knowing about how to pray. Does that make sense to people, or was that too much? Sorry, man. I hope that made some kind of sense. Is everyone on board with what we said there, or is there any questions about that? Anyway, man, we've got some new people here, man. Who's Wissam? Assalamu alaikum. Wissam Alfa's here as well. Assalamu alaikum, Alfa. Humdan. Assalamu alaikum. Suhail Nur Muhammad. Assalamu alaikum, Suhail Nur Muhammad, man. Good to have you. Azhar. Assalamu alaikum. You got a nice background, man. MashaAllah. Advanced stuff there, man. He's in the Middle East as well. MashaAllah. Suhail Nur Muhammad. Assalamu alaikum. Who's here, man? Cherno. Assalamu alaikum. Suhail Choksi. Assalamu alaikum, Suhail Choksi. How are you, man? Very nice to have you. And Mudassar Khan, the two doctors are next to each other. MashaAllah. Assalamu Mudassar. Good to have you here, man. Anyway, man. Gee, any questions based on what I've said? Because I know some of you joined a little bit late. Let me just read through the chat quickly, see what you guys are saying. Yeah, I think what Salman says, that it's nice to actually, like even personally, I learn a lot from the reverts. When Ian first came to the mosque, like I learned, not exactly learning, but just getting more in touch with how spiritual an environment the mosque actually has. That's something which I learned from Ian. But Salman saying that, is insightful to hear from Riva. Exactly, because they've actually thought about this process a lot more, man. But yeah, I hope that helped a little bit. Anyway, man. Oh, you haven't said Assalamu alaikum to Fadil. Fadil, Assalamu alaikum. Is that your dad there in the background? MashaAllah, good. MashaAllah, how is he, man? Long time. Is that Fakir? Fakir, Assalamu alaikum, man. Good to have you here, man. So just to recap, the first lesson of yesterday. So just for those of you that weren't here yesterday, there's some verses in the Quran where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala actually speaks about Ramadan, and He introduces us to the whole concept of fasting and Ramadan and getting in touch with Allah and all of these kind of things. And in the first verse, the first place where Allah speaks about Ramadan, the verse is on the screen now for those of you that are following the slide, and there's a picture of some dates and water as well, just to make you hungry. But Allah speaks about the reason fasting exists. So the reason that fasting exists is, and for those of you that can see the screen, if you can see my mouse, is this last bit of the verse here, لَعَلَّكُمْ تَتَّقُونَ. So Allah mentions that you have fasting and it's ordained upon you and it's compulsory. And the reason fasting is compulsory, who remembers the translation of لَعَلَّكُمْ تَتَّقُونَ from yesterday, for those of you that were here, or even if you weren't here, if you know the translation? GP. Yes, good. So so if there was one reason, Wissam was getting ready, MashaAllah, Salman beat you. But alhamdulillah, I'm sure you'd had the right answer as well. It's always nice when people try and give the answer. It's really helpful, man. But yeah, man, just so that you can attain taqwa. The primary purpose was to get taqwa. And I think, from day one, for those of you that have been here from the beginning, I know some of you have just been here for a few days, some of you have come for, some of you might even be here for the first day today. But the primary thing that we've been focusing on, I think the title of this class has been Taqwa training. And that's what makes the class so simple. Now, for those of you that come regularly, you'll realize that from the moment that we start until the moment that we leave, we don't always even bring a new hadith up. We don't go through a new verse of the Quran. It's very often just reminding ourselves that the point of this month, now we're on day 12, the point of it was just to get ourselves back in touch with our awareness of Allah, with the consciousness of Allah. And very often that is asking the right questions. MIQ is on the screen. MIQ, the most important questions. Which very often, the question in itself is more important than the answer sometimes. And I think what we've learned is The answers are actually always there. The answers are there in our life. The answers are in our body. The answers are all around us. But what gets us in touch with the answer is asking the right question. So I think that's why the question is really, really important. Making sure that the question is right. Asking what is taqwa, asking where is my taqwa, and asking how can I hope for my taqwa to improve and be enhanced within the next 18 days, 17 days. How many other days we've got left of Ramadan? How can these few days that we have left actually make sure that our taqwa by day 30 is enhanced? It's on another level. And just to answer that question of what is taqwa, that point on the slide there, which is that taqwa, kind of broadly speaking, consists of two things. Number one is the awareness of Allah, the consciousness of Allah, how much we feel Allah in our life. Again, something which is reflective of how in touch we are with our spirit, how much we've thought about our connection with Allah. So that's the first aspect of taqwa. And the second aspect of taqwa is that control which that brings into your life. Yeah, so now you've got this awareness of Allah, now you know Allah's with you and Allah's watching you. That gives you the ability to actually control what goes on. So Ramadan is the training which we have. So usually outside of Ramadan we're able to do whatever we want whenever we want. We're able to eat whatever we want whenever we want. But when Ramadan comes, it all changes. Now we have to actually control ourselves. So Ramadan gives that heightened sense of awareness that Allah is actually with us all the time. So it gives us that practice. And when you have that awareness actually means that you don't eat whatever you want whenever you want. It means you don't just do whatever you want. You actually have a control. So that awareness that actually translates into a certain control which you have on your life. So now when it's time to do something, we're actually able to think about it and do it with taqwa, do it with consciousness, and do it with awareness. Does that make sense to everyone? So that's just how we answer that question of what is taqwa, and just bringing that taqwa into our life, so that every day we're actually figuring out how is my awareness of Allah actually affecting my life to some extent. So that was taqwa. And then we went on to the next verse, which was so these are the verses of Surah Baqarah, chapter 2 of the Quran, verses 183. This is verse 183, and this is 184, أيام معدودات. And here, what happens here is Allah discusses how the Muslims used to fast before Ramadan was obligatory. Yeah, so there were just a few days, and if the Muslims at that time didn't want to fast and they could afford to pay fidya, then they were allowed to pay fidya at that time as well. Again, it just brings us in touch with the whole idea that when somebody is at a certain stage of their spiritual journey, they may be doing things in a certain different way, and it requires a bit of guidance to help them develop and come to the next stage of their journey. So here, at first, it wasn't that strict, even in Islam. So they were just encouraged to fast, but even if somebody could afford to pay the fidya, they were allowed to pay the fidya. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala here, He just brings attention towards that. And then in the next verse, this is where we had a lot of interesting things going on. So I want to go deeper onto this verse, which is on the screen now. Because can everyone see the slide here? You can. Zoom has some nice features, man. It's got a thumbs up feature as well. But before we go on, I'm just going to read the chat. When I first started, AJ, I didn't know the surahs but wanted to pray, so I used my phone. Additionally, I managed to get a Salah, the guidebook for prayer, which helped me for the actions. Okay, so I think AJ was just speaking about how originally he would use his phone to guide him. And again, that's an important point. I think even some of the questions which I get throughout Ramadan. When did this phone question come up? I think this came up with the sisters. I think the CICC sisters little question which we had. We had a Q&A session with the sisters. And they asked this question of like, what if I can't read? Because obviously everyone's worried that we have to pray Taraweeh at home, and usually we're at the mosque and it's all it's all sorted because the imams sort it all out for us, and now we have to pray it ourselves. How do we go about that? So the question came up about, are you allowed to now use your phone or use a physical copy of the Quran to help guide you, if you struggle, if you're having to rely on what you know by heart. And I think the answer to that is quite reflective of the diversity which we have in Islam, and also it gets you in touch with the fact that everyone's on a bit of a journey. Yeah, so again, the answer would be like AJ mentioned. So if somebody doesn't know how to read or whatever, then at the beginning, obviously, you're going to be relying on looking at something, and that will make it much easier for you to actually pray. In fact, when we study Islam, when it comes to helping a new Muslim actually get into Islam and actually be able to properly follow Islam, there's a lot of leeway there. So so when we study the book, so for example, at the time of Imam Abu Hanifa, the common language wasn't obviously English. They used to speak Farsi. So what he'll write in his books, I think you'll find this in Hidayah, which is the most famous kind of book for Imam Abu Hanifa, how we understand his mazhab. So what he'll write is, if somebody can read Farsi, then originally they're allowed to read their prayer in Farsi, in their native language. But they also have a responsibility to learn as much as they can. And nowadays, when somebody's learned how to read Arabic, but they don't know it fluently, so they can't read it without looking in, then at first they're allowed to look inside, and then once they get more and more fluent, they're allowed to read it without looking inside. And just like this applies to a new Muslim, this concept of tadrij, I know I spoke about this a long time ago in Colchester Mosque, and I know Mudathir, Dr. Mudathir, who's here, has learnt that word by heart, and he loves that word, and he uses it against me now. Whenever I push him to work a bit harder, he's like, "No, I'm just doing tadrij." But obviously, like the idea of understanding your journey as a process, and realizing that there'll be a point where you don't know what to read, so you'll have to look inside, and then once you learn it, then obviously you don't have to look inside anymore, which is very, very helpful. Sorry, I was trying to answer AJ's point there. Does anyone else have anything to add there? I know some of you turned your mics on. Yeah. Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely, man. It makes perfect sense. I think that's really good. Hmm. Hmm. I think that's the perfect mindset to really have. A mindset of continual growth, because I think all of the Muslims here are always going to be making mistakes as well. Because we're always going to be learning slowly, I think, even in terms of because even all the Muslims who are here, Arabic is not a native language for all of us. So even getting in touch with the letters and how to say the letters, it takes a journey of continual growth, which is really, really important. So I think one of the most important things in terms of our spiritual journey is to have spiritual growth as one of the number one things which we're aiming for. And very often, if you do that, all of the rules which are there in the books, and when we're learning about Islam, like pray like this, X, Y, and Z, the rules will kind of shape to that, if that makes any sense. So, for example, if you open the book, you'd see some of the scholars will have written that you're not allowed um, to to look inside and pray at the same time. So that would be one of the rules. Um, okay, so anyway, Jazakallah for being here. It was really nice to have you. Assalamu alaikum. But the reason that's written there is for somebody who's kind of coming towards a more advanced version, kind of a more advanced stage of their journey. Does that make sense? But at the same time, if you open the same book, you'd probably find another rule saying that if somebody can't read without looking in, then they should read with looking in while they're praying. So the actual thing, the thing which is actually important is your spiritual journey and your spiritual growth. So if we can keep an eye on that and actually keep, so that's why having a class like this is actually quite important. So when we come to Ramadan and realize that what the most important thing is actually the consciousness of Allah, is actually your taqwa, then the rules which are there, all of the rules which we've learned as kids or learned while we're learning about Islam, they actually shape very nicely around our spiritual journey. Does that make sense? As opposed to what I've noticed with Muslims is sometimes the rules hold us back. And we get so scared because of the rules that we get scared that, oh, I might be doing this wrong, so I might as well just give up altogether. And then we kind of hold ourselves up to these standards, which are kind of the standards which are impossible to actually hold yourselves up to, because you never were meant to be so perfect in the first place. I hope that makes sense. Is that making sense? I think when Ian and AJ speak, they make more sense than I do. I just wish I think tomorrow we just let them do the talk. But anyway, there's another question on the group. So, Nicola said something. I did and found out that it wasn't permitted. Crash course in learning badly. 2 salah which I unlearning and relearning thanks to the lockdown. Yeah. I did and found out that it wasn't permitted. Okay, yeah. Yes, I think that's a good point from Nicola, which is that sometimes we try and learn something and then we learn that it's not permitted. So imagine you're praying, yeah, and you're not really very good at reciting the Quran. So you're coming into your prayer and you're praying, and someone tells you that you're not allowed to read it while it's looking in. So you stop reading it while it's looking in, and now you're praying and you're just panicking. Which is no good to anyone at all. That's not really very helpful at all, is it? So I think that's why it's important to also, I think a good kind of litmus test for knowing whether you're going in the right direction is, are you growing in terms of your spirit, in terms of your consciousness, in terms of your awareness of Allah? And if that's happening, that's usually a good sign that you're following the rules in the right way. Otherwise, you might be kind of fixatedly following the rules when you don't need to. And also missing out the concept of tadrij, missing out the concept that this is meant to be a journey and you are meant to be growing rather than trying to aim for this, for perfection. And I think Nadeem asked, what is tadrij? Tadrij is to grow slowly, so to take things one step at a time, rather than trying to read the whole Quran in a whole month and understand the whole thing in 1 month, which I think still happens nowadays. Like people try and read the whole Quran. And then at the same time they're trying to listen to some like quick explanation which covers like that bit of the Quran, and they're trying to really race through it. Whereas for a lot of people, I think most Muslims will be at a stage where they actually need to slow down a bit and maybe focus maybe on Surah Fatiha, or focus on some of the smaller surahs where they can actually learn firstly to recite them with clarity, so that you're reciting them, giving time to the letters, so that you're not rushing through the letters. And also understanding, what the meaning is behind those letters. So anyway, man, gee, man, how is everyone doing, man? Is everyone here? Is everyone following? Is that making sense to everyone? Yes, Hamdan, man, you're quiet today, man. Chalo, man, that's good. Suhail Noor, man, how are you? Are you there? Brother Azhar, you have such a nice background, man. And you've gone. Abdul Quddus, are you still? Mudassir Khan, man. How's everything going in the NHS, man? Is everything okay? Alhamdulillah, man. Oh, alhamdulillah, man. How's your iftar going? Do you get good iftar? I heard people are providing you iftar nowadays, man. Oh, yeah, oh, yeah, mashallah. So what's everyone providing? Is there any consciousness around the health of the of the iftar? Shut up, Hamdan. As if you gave free sofas to NHS workers. Mashallah, man. Yeah. Oh, for the hospital. Mashallah, man. That's good, man. Mashallah. I think Hamdan's trying to promote DFS. You no, mashallah. No, but now that was a serious question though. What's everyone eating nowadays for iftar, man? Because it's important, man. We covered this at the beginning, I think. Mashallah, that's good, man. Yeah, true, man. Yeah, I've had to do that as well, cause I'm thinking, cause my dad's forcing me to do tarawihs, man, which is really good for me, if I'm honest, cause I'm actually having to practice Quran quite a lot. So I can't eat anything at iftar time. So I have dates. I used to have like a date, but then it's just too sweet, man. So I don't actually have a full date. So I like so I have so my wife cuts my salad. Which obviously is mainly avocado, if I'm honest. And then there's salad in there. But I prefer avocado. So I usually break my fast with avocado. Then I have a bit of water, and then I break up a bit of a date. So like it's those hench dates, those big dates, the ones that you get from Palestine. Um, so one of those big ones. So that's enough for. So that one date is enough for my whole salad. So I put it in and it makes the salad a little bit sweet, which is probably a bit weird for some of you, but I think it's quite nice. Um, yeah. Um, oh yeah, mine are a bit big, so I stick to one, man. It's enough for the whole salad, man. But that's my salad. So I don't usually get around to fruit, man. There's too much sugar in fruit. It makes me a bit. I get a sugar high off fruit. If I'm honest. I've started. That's not good for my brain, man. Because then I have to concentrate after Maghrib, man. So I try and yeah, man. Yeah, but the date has a lot of sugar, and then my wife has fruit salad, so I sometimes have a bit. But I try and stick to blueberries, because they're quite good. They're quite good for your brain. Um, but yeah, man, that's it at iftar time, and then I pray tarawih, and then I come back. Then after tarawih, I have my extreme healthy stuff, which is a combination of a lot of advice which I've received. Like over the past few years, I've been focusing on my health. So I had a brain teacher, um, I think in 2018. So he gave me a list of 10 things which I should eat for my brain. So that involved, so in there, so that's turmeric and dark chocolate. But the reason he said dark chocolate was because of the cocoa powder with inside it. So I think cocoa is really important for your brain. So he said blueberries, avocados, turmeric, and cocoa powder. And he's my brain teacher, so he actually taught me how to remember the list as well. So let me go through the list, man. So it's avocado, blueberries, coconut oil, broccoli, eggs. I'm just going through the list, man. I'm clever because I remember this from 2 years ago. Eggs, salmon. What was here, man? Oh, he's not a very good teacher, is he? I forgot. Oh, is it? But yeah, man. But he gave me a list of things, so that was a really good list because it just gives you a list of things which you know that you need and you know that you need to be going through. So that was quite useful. So after Tarawih, I usually have that, um, which is kind of good. But then, yeah, it fills me up too much, man. So I used to have that with milk. So I used to have like turmeric and cocoa powder and a bit of protein powder because I think you need protein as well. So I used to have that with milk, but milk used to just kill me, man. I don't think the milk in this country is very good for you. When I went to Pakistan, my wife's got an actual cow in her house, which gives milk, and it's so different to the milk in this country, man. I think the milk in this country is fake, man. So I've kind of tried to. Yeah, man. Yeah, man. Yeah, but no, because I noticed because obviously when you're fasting the whole day, then you have that. I used to have salad for iftar, and then I used to have milk in the protein shake, and it used to mess me up, man. Because I couldn't used to sleep, and but anyway, man. So now I have it in water, which doesn't taste very nice, but I gotta get it in it. Um, anyway, man. So and then for sahur I usually have like breakfast. So I'm allowed to have toast. I'm allowed to have some carbs for breakfast, which is toast and and eggs. Yeah, that would be better, I think. But I need a bit of protein, so I kind of go for eggs. Um, yeah. To be honest, I would recommend porridge, man. It's probably the cleverest thing to have for bread. Wa alaikum assalam, Isam. How are you, man? Okay. No worries, man. I'll remind you. Alhamdulillah, man. Good to have you here, man. Good to see you, man. Alhamdulillah. We're just talking about iftar. That everyone making sure everyone eats healthy food because um, some people are providing food to our national health service. So because it's a health service, I think they should be leading the way in how healthy the food is. But anyway, we're just checking that everyone's having some kind of healthy foods within the iftar. Anyway, if anyone else wants to share, man, yeah, everyone's welcome, man. Um, we're, mashallah. God's It's not good to sleep, man. Sleeping is bad for your health, man. If you sleep too much, it ruins your brain. Your brain becomes all. I think you're allowed up to 8, man. 8, 9 in Ramadan, 9. But yeah, I'm aiming for yeah. I aim for about 7. But so Faizan, man, what's going on, man? Hey, what did you think of Donald Trump's response to the coronavirus, man? Ah, yeah. No, that's why I asked you because I know you like him. So I thought, yeah. I don't think having like talking about politics is going to be very easy on this forum, if I'm honest. Especially Faizan, especially with your views. You can discuss them with me, but not with the. Not very many, not very many, man. You know, you're not gonna get many. Okay, can we? I think we need to stop talking about politics, man. But anyway, man. But that was good, man. I think it's good to discuss the iftar thing, man, because iftar. Oh, sorry. Because iftar and sleeping, these two things, man, they make up a lot of. Because obviously, when I teach people to try and connect with Allah, you're looking at spirit awareness, self awareness, body awareness, and to some extent the awareness of your consciousness. What we do in this class is become aware of your taqwa. That's what we're trying to do, and it's very dependent on what you put in your mouth. Very dependent. If you're putting, if you're, gee, gee, so if you're getting that awareness of so if you have that awareness of what happens at iftar time, what you put in your mouth, what happens at sleeping time, like do we sleep the whole day and then wake up feeling less energized than even when you went to sleep? This is a bit of a waste of time, isn't it? So food is very, very important, and food has a massive effect on what's going to happen throughout the day, and even that awareness of your spirit is going to be affected by the food that you have. So what I definitely recommend is trying to cut away from, especially at that iftar time, like Hamdan mentioned. I think Hamdan's answer was really nice. That what Hamdan does is he separates the breaking the fast bit, breaking the 16, 17 hours of not eating, and eating a meal, which is very important. And what I'd recommend is for that bit where you break your fast, is during that time of breaking your fast, only eat foods which have been directly created by Allah. So you shouldn't have human interference in that food. Yeah. So to some extent, if you can have mineral water, which has kind of come directly from the rocks, Evian or Buxton or whatever you guys like, but trying to have water which has come directly from the sky or directly from Allah, something natural like dates if it's sweet, fruits obviously, and salad. So things which it doesn't take, like you don't have to think about how did Allah create this food. You can see directly how it came off the tree or how it came out of the ground, and you can see even the seeds, like how Allah is going to recreate them. So when you have that food directly created the way Allah created for us to eat it, then you actually eating something which is suitable for the human diet. Sometimes we're eating things which are not even meant to be in the human diet, and then we're wondering why we're losing touch with our spirit and why we're feeling lazy and out of touch with ourselves. But it's very important when Allah creates food, He's created specifically designed for the human body, and He created the human body. So it's important to try and have that time. So you have that gap between, you don't eat anything except something which Allah created for you to eat. So things like things which are going to destroy your body, like samosas, pakoras, Mars bars, and whatever, all these other ridiculous things which we think are suitable for the human diet. Really, you shouldn't be eating those in Ramadan, and definitely not at iftar time. Not at that time where you're breaking your spiritual fast, where you practiced controlling your actions, and now you go and destroy all of that by putting things which aren't even suitable for the human diet in your mouth. So it's really important to have that control. And what Hamdan said was a really good, I think, example. Just trying to make sure that period is just food which Allah has created. And see, like, this is not an abstract idea. If you try it today, you'll understand exactly what I'm talking about. Just try it for one day, that you don't eat anything unless you can directly see how Allah created that food. If you look at the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, it's actually quite rare that he'd actually eat food which was cooked. It's not very common that it would be normal for months to pass without too much cooking going on in his houses or in any of his wife's houses. So it's important to realize that sometimes we should be eating food which has actually been created by Allah, and has been directly created by Allah. So we see how that food affects the body which Allah has created, and then trying to pray Tarawih with that food, with that energy. And that will, because I think sometimes we're out of touch with our spirit, we're out of touch with taqwa, we're kind of a bit distant from Allah, and very often the primary reason is actually the things we're putting inside our mouth And if it's a month of Ramadan, the one thing we're meant to learn in Ramadan is to control what we put in our mouth. Primarily. The other thing is, controlling your carnal desires. But primarily, we're kind of thinking twice about what we put inside our mouth. So it's very, very important to kind of, keep that way. And so, inshallah, keep that in mind for tonight, so that when we come tomorrow, we're actually, a bit more refreshed. So you don't run out of energy then, because the food which Allah creates knows how to give you the energy which you need, man. There's no complexities there. You don't have to fry it. You don't have to put it in the microwave. You don't have to do anything. And also with sleep. So inshallah we'll carry on tomorrow, inshallah, man. Jazakallah everyone for getting involved. When you guys get involved, we have a bit more of a practical lesson. So the ideas that we're taking away are a bit more, easy to implement. But inshallah, man. Good to see you all, man. But especially in it. Yeah. Well, it's okay. But obviously it's very, very high in sugar. Nowadays, honey is basically just sugar. Yeah. Well, again, it's the same as milk. And unless you can find honey which is from a beehive, it's basically sugar. Honey is just another name for sugar a lot of the time. So I definitely wouldn't recommend sugar in Britain. Sorry, I wouldn't recommend honey in Britain. It's a shifa if it's coming out of if it's coming out of a bee. The Quran talks about a bee, the honey bee. If you go to the Tesco's factory or whatever, what's that company called, Rose, which makes all that, which makes something which they call honey, and see how they make it. It's not very natural. It's not very naturally made. So essentially, it's made from sugar. If you think about it, which is not very useful at all a lot of the time. So it's important to be very, very wary of things like honey and milk. Because obviously the Prophet ﷺ recommends milk, but he doesn't recommend Tesco's pasteurized, semi-skimmed, full-fat milk or whatever is there, or even the organic stuff. If you can find organic stuff, it's a bit better. But in this country, man, okay, man. See you guys tomorrow, man. We'll carry on this discussion tomorrow, man. Good to have you all, inshallah. See you tomorrow. Assalamu alaikum. Okay, assalamu alaikum. Assalamu alaikum. Inshallah, man. Inshallah. Everyone remember to focus on your iftar today, man. Okay, assalamu alaikum, people, man. Wa alaikum salam. Wa alaikum salam. Wa alaikum salam.